I remember the exact moment everything changed. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a confession. It was a Tuesday, 3:15 in the afternoon. I was standing in the kitchen of our apartment in Chicago, the one we'd picked out together because of the floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the lake, and I was scrolling through my phone, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. I wasn't looking for anything. That's the part that gets me. I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't even thinking about him in any deep way. I was just standing there, barefoot on the cold tile, wearing his old college sweatshirt, thinking about what I was going to make for dinner. That was my life then. Simple, predictable, safe. His name was Nate. We'd been together for just over 4 years, married for one. He was the kind of guy who made you feel like you were the only person in the world when he looked at you. He had this way of tilting his head to the side when he listened, like whatever you were saying was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. He remembered little things. My coffee order, how I liked my eggs, the name of my first dog. He was the guy who fixed the leaky faucet without being asked and left little sticky notes on the bathroom mirror for me to find when I woke up. He was good. He was solid. He was the kind of man you build a life around, the kind you trust with your heart because he's never given you a reason not to. And then my phone buzzed. It was just a notification from the building's security app, a maintenance alert, something about the elevator on the west side of the lobby being out of order again. I almost swiped it away. I almost didn't click, but I did, because I saw something in the thumbnail. A familiar jacket. A familiar shape. And I thought, that's weird, he's supposed to be at work right now, I clicked on the live feed from the lobby camera, and I watched my husband step into the working elevator. But he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. She was laughing. Her hand was resting on his arm like it belonged there, and when the doors slid shut, I watched his face and I didn't recognize him. He was smiling at her in a way I hadn't seen in months. Not the tired, routine smile he gave me when he walked through the door after a long day. No, this was younger, hungry, secret. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there, coffee mug halfway to my lips, the feed frozen in my mind. My brain started doing this thing where it tried to rationalize. It's a coworker, it's a friend. He's just being polite. But the way she touched him, the way he leaned into her, I knew, I didn't want to know, but I knew. I felt this cold spread through my chest like someone had cracked a window open in the middle of winter and let all the warmth out. My hands started shaking. I put the mug down before I dropped it. I called him. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Straight to voicemail. That's when I felt it. That hot, suffocating panic that makes you feel like you're falling. I walked to the door of our apartment and opened it. I looked down the hall. Nothing, just the quiet hum of the building. The carpet was clean. The lights were bright. Everything looked normal, but nothing was normal anymore. I walked back inside and sat down on the couch and I didn't cry. I just stared at the wall. I couldn't even form the words in my head. My husband is cheating on me. It didn't sound real. It sounded like a bad movie. It sounded like something that happened to other women. Not me. Not the girl who planned her wedding around the peonies in bloom. Not the girl who still kissed him goodbye every morning even when he was running late. But the camera doesn't lie. He came home at 7:15 that evening. He brought takeout. Thai food, my favorite. He walked in, smiling, loosening his tie, and he kissed me on the cheek like always. He smelled like cologne. His work cologne, but underneath it I caught something else. Vanilla, perfume, her perfume. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just sat there, letting him set the food out on the counter, listening to him talk about his day. Meetings, deadlines, an annoying client. He used the same voice he always used, the one that was supposed to sound intimate, and it felt like sandpaper. Every word scraped against me. I watched his hands, the same hands that had touched me, touched her. I watched his mouth, and I wondered where else it had been. I asked him how his day was, just to see if he'd lie again. And he did. He smiled, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, boring, just another Tuesday. It was the casualness of it that broke something inside me. He could look at me and lie without hesitation, without a flicker. He could stand there in our home, in the kitchen we picked out together, surrounded by photos of us, and act like the elevator, that woman, the whole afternoon, had never happened. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and stood with my forehead pressed against the mirror. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just looked at myself at the face that had trusted him completely, and I felt so stupid, so unbearably stupid. That night I didn't sleep. I lay next to him, listening to him breathe, and I replayed every moment of the last year in my head. The late nights, the missed calls, the times he said he was working late, the times he seemed distant. I had justified it all. I had made excuses for him. I had told myself that marriage had ups and downs, that we were just in a phase, that things would get better. And all the while he was somewhere else, with someone else, sharing things I thought were ours. The next morning I pretended to go to work. I packed my bag, kissed him goodbye, and drove straight back to the building. I parked across the street and I waited. I wanted to see it again. I needed to know who she was. I needed to know if I knew her, and then I saw them. At 9:14 in the morning, he walked out of the lobby with her. She was wearing a sleek black dress and heels, even though it was barely 9 in the morning. Her hair was long and blonde, and she had this effortless confidence that made my stomach turn. He opened the door for her. He laughed at something she said. He put his hand on her lower back as they walked toward his car, and I watched them leave. I felt like I was watching my own life from outside my body, like I was a ghost haunting someone else's marriage. I followed them. I don't know why. I was in my car, driving behind his car, and I had no plan. I was just running on adrenaline and heartbreak. They drove to a coffee shop on the north side. I parked far away and watched through the window. They sat in a corner booth, close to each other, their heads bent together, their hands touching across the table. She looked at him like he was the sun, and he looked at her like she was the moon. I had seen that look before. I had been on the receiving end of it, but now I understood how temporary it was, how easily it could be shifted to someone else. I sat there for 2 hours. I didn't eat. I didn't drink, I just watched them, and when they left, I didn't follow them again. I went home. I sat on the floor of my closet, surrounded by his clothes, her smell still haunting my memory, and I started to cry. The crying didn't stop. It came in waves. One moment I was numb, the next I was furious, the next I was just so unbearably sad. I thought about our wedding. I thought about his vows. I thought about all the people who had watched us promise forever, and I felt like I was drowning. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't confront him yet. I didn't have proof. I mean, I had the footage, but that wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to know everything, so I started looking. His phone was locked, but I knew his password. It had always been the same. I waited until he was in the shower, and I took his phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it through the bathroom door. I opened his messages, and there they were, hundreds of them, weeks, months, maybe longer. I scrolled, and every message was a knife. Asterisk, I can't stop thinking about you. Asterisk, asterisk, last night was incredible. Asterisk, asterisk, when can I see you again? Asterisk, asterisk, I wish I could wake up next to you. Asterisk, she knew about me. She called me by name. She asked him if he had told me yet. And he told her, asterisk, I'm waiting for the right time. Asterisk, that phrase, asterisk, the right time, asterisk, as if there was ever going to be a right time to destroy me, as if he could soften the blow, as if he could make any of this okay. I put his phone back exactly where I found it. I went into the bathroom and brushed my teeth beside him like nothing had happened. I smiled at his reflection in the mirror, and I hated myself for that smile. But I couldn't show him, not yet. That night after he fell asleep, I lay awake and I thought about my options. I could leave. I could pack a bag and go to my sister's place and never look back. I could burn everything to the ground, or I could stay. I could stay and I could play his game and I could figure out the rest of it. I could find out who she really was. I could find out how long it had been going on. I could find out if he loved her. I needed to know. Because if he loved her, then this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice, and I needed to know if I had been living a lie for years or just months. I made my decision in the dark. I was going to stay. I was going to gather every piece of evidence I could find. I was going to get into his email, his social media, his calendar. I was going to learn everything about her. And then, when I had all the pieces, I was going to end it in a way he would never forget. I wasn't going to be the woman who cried and begged. I wasn't going to be the woman who gave him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I was going to be the woman who made him regret every single lie he ever told. But I didn't realize how hard it would be, how every day would be a performance. Every kiss goodnight would taste like ash. Every asterisk, I love you, asterisk would feel like betrayal. I started sleeping on the very edge of the bed so I wouldn't accidentally touch him. I started making excuses to avoid being alone with him. I started drinking coffee in the morning just to feel something other than numb, and all the while I kept watching. I kept waiting. I kept building my case. I took screenshots. I saved receipts. I found out her name was Vanessa. She worked in his office. She was married too, and I found out they had been seeing each other for almost a year. A year. I thought about our anniversary, the trip to Napa, the way he held my hand across the table and told me I was his everything. I thought about Christmas morning, the way he kissed me under the mistletoe. I thought about my birthday, the necklace he gave me, the way he whispered that he couldn't imagine life without me, and all of it was a lie. Every sweet moment was just a cover for the moments he was spending with her. I felt like I had been erased, like the person I thought I was married to didn't even exist. I was living with a stranger who knew exactly how to make me believe I was loved. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror anymore. And then, one evening, he came home early. I was in the living room, pretending to read a book. He sat down next to me, closer than he had in weeks, and he took my hand. I felt my skin crawl. He looked at me with those eyes, the ones that used to make me feel like I was the only woman in the world, and he said, "Asterisk, we need to talk." Asterisk, my heart stopped. I thought, asterisk, this is it. He's going to tell me, he's going to confess. Asterisk, but he didn't. He told me he had been feeling distant. He told me work had been stressful. He told me he wanted to do better. He wanted to reconnect. He wanted to take me on a weekend trip, just the two of us. He squeezed my hand and he said, "Asterisk, I love you, I don't want to lose us." Asterisk, and I sat there looking into the eyes of the man who had been cheating on me for a year, and I said, "Asterisk, I love you too." Asterisk, I said it, out loud, to his face. And I meant it. That's the worst part. A part of me still loved him, or loved the memory of him, or loved the idea of who he used to be, and I hated myself for it. I hated myself for not screaming, for not throwing his phone at his head, for not telling him I had seen everything. But I couldn't, because if I told him now, he would just apologize. He would cry. He would promise to change. And I would be left wondering if I had made the right choice. I needed to see the whole picture before I made my move. I needed to know exactly how far he had fallen. I needed to know if there was anything left to save, so I smiled. I nodded. I let him kiss me on the forehead, and I started planning my next step. I started watching his every move. I started noticing the small lies, the ones that piled up like grains of sand. I started collecting them, and I started waiting for the right moment. My moment. I didn't know when it would come, but I knew it would come. And when it did, I was going to make sure he remembered it forever. I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. I thought I had already hit the bottom that night. I sat on the floor of my closet, surrounded by his sweaters and his shoes, choking on the smell of vanilla that wasn't mine. But I was wrong. That was just the beginning. The real pain didn't start until I started living with the knowledge. Until I had to wake up every morning next to a man who had become a stranger, look him in the eyes, and pretend I didn't know that his hands had been on someone else's body just hours before they touched mine. The weight of it was crushing. I started losing weight. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I would lie in bed with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every detail of every message I'd read, every image I'd seen, every moment I'd witnessed. And he would roll over in his sleep, completely oblivious, and I would feel this violent urge to scream in his face. But I didn't. I held it in. I held it all in. I started becoming someone I didn't recognize. I became a detective in my own marriage. I became a liar. I became a woman who smiled at her husband while secretly tracking his location on her phone. I started going through his things when he wasn't home. I went through his work bag. I went through his car. I found a receipt for a hotel downtown, the one with the rooftop bar he'd always talked about taking me to but never did. He'd taken her instead. I found a pair of earrings in the glove compartment. Gold hoops, not mine. I took them. I put them in my pocket and I walked back upstairs and I sat on the couch and I stared at the wall until I couldn't see anymore. I was collecting evidence like a prosecutor building a case, but what I was really doing was killing myself slowly. Every new piece of information was a hammer to the chest, and I kept asking for more. I learned her name was Vanessa and I became obsessed with her. I looked her up on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. She was beautiful. I hated that. I wanted her to be ugly. I wanted her to be mean. I wanted her to be someone I could easily despise, but she wasn't. She was the kind of woman you see at a coffee shop and think, asterisk, she probably has her life together, asterisk. She had these bright blue eyes and this perfect smile and a husband who looked like he adored her. She was an interior designer. She had a dog. She had a house in the suburbs. She had everything. And she wanted my husband. I started following her social media, and I don't even know why. I would sit in the bathroom with my phone, scrolling through her photos, hating her and wanting to be her at the same time. I wanted to know what she had that I didn't. What made her worth the lies? What made her worth risking everything for? And then I found out she knew about me. She knew from the very beginning. He had told her he was married, and she didn't care. She called me by name in one of their conversations. Asterisk, does Emily suspect anything? Asterisk, she asked him that. She called me Emily like she had any right to say my name, and he told her asterisk, no, she's clueless. She trusts me completely. Asterisk, I read that message 6 times. I memorized it. I burned it into my brain. Asterisk, she trusts me completely. Asterisk, he said it like it was a joke. Like my love for him was a weakness he could exploit. Like my loyalty was something to be laughed at. And she laughed with him. She called me naive. She called me a good little wife. And then they went back to talking about all the things they wanted to do to each other. I threw up after reading that. I ran to the bathroom and I vomited everything I'd eaten that day, and I sat on the cold floor, sweating and shaking, and I thought, asterisk, I will never let them forget this. I will never let them be happy. Asterisk, but I still didn't confront him. I still didn't leave. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. I told myself I needed more proof. But the truth was, I was terrified. I was terrified of what would happen when I finally said the words out loud. I was terrified of watching him deny it. I was terrified of watching him admit it. I was terrified of the silence that would follow. I was terrified of being alone. I had built my entire adult life around this man. My friends were our friends. My routines were our routines. My future was our future. And I didn't know who I was without him. I had forgotten how to be just me, so I stayed. I stayed and I played the role of the oblivious wife, and I let him kiss me goodbye every morning, and I let him hold me at night, and I let him believe he was getting away with it. But the performance was killing me. I started having panic attacks. I'd be standing in the grocery store, picking out avocados, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My chest would tighten, my vision would blur, and I'd have to grab onto the shopping cart just to keep from falling. I'd have to walk out of the store and sit in my car and put my head between my knees and wait for it to pass. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped answering calls. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped taking care of myself. I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She was hollow. She was broken. She was a shell of the person I used to be, and no one noticed. That was the part that really got me. No one noticed that I was falling apart. Not my mom, not my sister, not my best friend, not my husband. I was drowning in plain sight, and everyone just kept going about their lives like nothing was wrong. I started drinking, just a glass of wine at first, then 2, then the whole bottle. I'd wait until he fell asleep, and I'd pour myself a glass in the dark kitchen, and I'd drink until the pain was blurry. It was the only way I could get through the nights. The only way I could stop myself from waking him up and screaming in his face. I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be the hysterical wife. I wanted to be in control. I wanted to be cold and calculated and ruthless. I wanted to have all the cards in my hand before I showed my hand, so I drank, and I planned, and I watched, and I waited. The weekend trip he'd promised me came. I still don't know why I went. Maybe I wanted to see if he could still be the man I fell in love with. Maybe I wanted to give him one last chance to prove me wrong. Maybe I was just too weak to say no. We drove up to a little cabin in Wisconsin, just the 2 of us, and for a few hours it almost felt like the old days. He was attentive, he was sweet, he held my hand, he made me laugh. He built a fire and we sat in front of it, and he told me he wanted to try harder. He told me he loved me. He told me I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and I looked at him and I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this was real. I wanted to believe that he was sincere. But I knew better. I knew every word was just another lie wrapped in pretty packaging. Because while we were sitting in front of that fire, he was texting her. I saw him. I was sitting right next to him and he was texting her. He told her he missed her. He told her he wished she was there. He told her it was torture being away from her. And I sat there, 6 inches from him, and I watched him type it. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just stared at the fire and felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces all over again. That was the moment I knew there was no fixing this. There was no going back. He didn't love me. He never had, not really, not the way he loved her. I was just a safety net. I was just the comfortable option. I was the wife he came home to, but she was the woman he wanted to come home to. And I had spent the last year of my life believing in a fantasy. I had spent the last year of my life loving a ghost. I didn't confront him that weekend. I played along. I smiled. I laughed. I let him kiss me in the moonlight. And when we got back home, I started making my move. I started moving my money into a separate account. I started looking at apartments. I started talking to a lawyer. I did it all in secret, in the hours he was at work, while he thought I was at my job. I was methodical. I was precise. I was so careful that he never suspected a thing. He still came home every night to a cooked meal and a clean house and a wife who smiled at him like everything was fine. He thought he was safe. He thought he was smart. He had no idea that I was about to become his worst nightmare. I found out everything about her. I found out her husband's name. I found out where she worked. I found out where they met. I found out that he had been seeing her for over a year, almost as long as we'd been married. I found out they had planned a trip together. A real trip. Not a weekend at a cabin, a trip to Mexico. He was going to take her to Mexico. He was going to tell me it was a business trip. He had already booked the flights. He had already booked the hotel. He had already bought her a necklace. I found the receipt. I found the photo of her wearing it. He had given it to her for Valentine's Day. While he was at home with me, eating the dinner I made, giving me the chocolates he bought at the drugstore, he had already sent her a necklace worth over $1,000. I felt like I was living in a nightmare that never ended. I started leaving things around the apartment. Subtle things, small things. I wanted him to feel what I felt. I wanted him to wonder. I wanted him to be afraid. I left a strand of long blonde hair on his pillow, not mine. I bought a bottle of perfume and sprayed it on his jacket. I left a receipt for a hotel in my purse, one he'd never taken me to, and I made sure he saw it. I watched his face when he found it. I watched the panic flicker in his eyes. I watched him try to hide it. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, searching for something, and I looked back at him with this blank, innocent expression, and I said, "What's wrong?" He said nothing. He shook his head. He went back to reading his phone, and I smiled. It was the first time I'd smiled in months that wasn't a lie. I was learning to play the game. I was learning to be the person I'd always thought I'd never have to be. I was learning to be cold. I was learning to be calculating. I was learning to lie as well as he did. And it felt good. It felt powerful. For the first time since I found out, I felt like I had some control. I felt like I was taking back my life, piece by piece. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a survivor. And I was going to make sure that when I finally walked out, I left nothing but rubble behind me. But I still wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. I wasn't ready to be alone. I wasn't ready to admit that my marriage was over, so I kept playing the game. I kept collecting evidence. I kept planning my exit. And I kept loving the man I used to know, even as I hated the man he had become. And then one night, everything changed. He came home late, way later than usual. He smelled like her. The vanilla was so strong I could taste it. He was drunk. He stumbled into the living room and he sat down next to me and he looked at me with these glassy eyes and he said, "Emily, I need to tell you something." My heart stopped. I thought, this is it. This is finally it. But then he started to cry. He actually started crying. He put his head in his hands and he said, "I've been a terrible husband. I've been distant. I've been selfish. I don't know what's wrong with me." He said he was sorry. He said he didn't deserve me. He said he wanted to be better. And I sat there looking at this broken man in front of me and I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. I had waited so long for this moment, and now that it was here, I was just empty. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel anything. I just looked at him and I said, "It's okay. We all make mistakes." I didn't mean it, but I said it, and he believed me. He thanked me. He cried. He held my hand. He said I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And I sat there, letting him believe that I had forgiven him, while inside I was already gone. I was already 1,000 miles away. I was already plotting my next move. I was already thinking about the lawyer I was going to call. I was already thinking about the apartment I was going to rent. I was already thinking about the life I was going to build without him, because I knew now. I knew that there was nothing left to save. I knew that this marriage was over. I knew that I was done. And I was finally ready to let go. I think the scariest part of the whole thing was how easy it became. Once I stopped feeling, once I stopped caring, once I accepted that my husband was a stranger and my marriage was a corpse, everything else just fell into place. I became a machine. I woke up, I went through the motions, I collected my evidence, and I went to bed. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't drink anymore. I just existed in this cold, hollow space where nothing could touch me. And that was exactly what I needed to finish what I started. I found an apartment. It was a small one-bedroom in a neighborhood I'd always loved but never lived in. It had a fire escape and a clawfoot tub and a view of the city that made me feel like I was standing on top of the world. It was nothing like the place I shared with Nate. It wasn't sleek or modern or full of expensive furniture we'd picked out together. It was just mine. It was raw and real and honest, and I fell in love with it the moment I walked through the door. I signed the lease in secret, using money I'd been siphoning from our joint account for months. I had a whole new life set up, and he didn't have a clue. I was moving in the shadows, and I was getting better at it every day. I started packing slowly, a few things at a time. I took my grandmother's necklace from the jewelry box. I took my books from the shelf. I took my journals and my photo albums and the little ceramic bowl I'd made in college. Things that mattered to me, things that had nothing to do with him. I stored them in boxes in the trunk of my car, under a blanket, so he wouldn't see them if he ever opened it. I was building a life inside my car, piece by piece, and it felt like I was smuggling my own soul out of a burning building. I was saving what I could, and I was leaving the rest to burn. But I still hadn't told him. I still hadn't confronted him. I was waiting for the perfect moment, and I knew it was coming. I had been tracking his calendar, and I knew he had a business trip coming up. A real one this time. He was flying to New York for 3 days, and he was going alone. Vanessa wasn't going with him. She was going to be here in the city with her husband, living her normal life, and I knew that was my window. 3 days. 3 days to move out, to disappear, to leave behind the wreckage of a marriage that was never really a marriage at all. I had it all planned. I had the movers lined up. I had the truck reserved. I had the keys to the new apartment. I had a new phone number. I had a new email address. I was ready to vanish. The night before he left, I made him dinner. I made his favorite, chicken parmesan and a bottle of red wine. I lit candles. I put on music. I wanted him to remember this night. I wanted him to remember the last night he ever saw me as his wife. He walked in and he looked so happy. He kissed me on the forehead and he told me I was amazing. He told me he was lucky to have me. He told me he couldn't wait to come back and start fresh. And I just smiled. I poured him another glass of wine. I laughed at his jokes. I let him hold my hand across the table. I let him believe that everything was okay. And all the while, I was saying goodbye in my head. I was memorizing the way his hair fell across his forehead. I was memorizing the sound of his laugh. I was memorizing the way he looked at me like I was the most important person in the world. Because I knew I would never see that look again. I knew that by the time he got home, I would be gone, and that look would belong to someone else. That night, I let him make love to me. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted one last time. Maybe I wanted to see if I could feel anything. Maybe I was just saying goodbye in the only way I knew how. It was strange. It was mechanical. I lay there and let him touch me and I felt nothing. Not love, not hate, not even pain, just a deep, empty numbness that covered me like a second skin. He fell asleep after, his arm draped across my waist, his breath warm on my neck. And I lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning. I woke up before him. I made him coffee. I packed his bag. I kissed him goodbye at the door, the same way I had every morning for the last 4 years. He smiled at me and said, "Asterisk, I'll call you when I land." Asterisk, I said, asterisk, I'll be here. Asterisk, and I watched him walk down the hall toward the elevator, the same elevator that had shown me the truth, the same elevator that had started this whole nightmare. He stepped inside, the doors slid shut, and he was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed doors, and I felt something crack inside me. Not pain, something else, something final. I went back inside and I started moving. I called the movers. I started hauling boxes down to the lobby. I worked like a woman possessed, like I was running from a fire, like every second I stayed was a second too long. I didn't stop to cry. I didn't stop to think. I just moved. I took my clothes. I took my books. I took my grandmother's china and my grandfather's watch and the painting my sister had given me for my birthday. I left everything else. I left the furniture. I left the dishes. I left the photos of us on the walls. I left his clothes in the closet and his shaving cream in the bathroom and his running shoes by the door. I wanted him to see what I had left behind. I wanted him to walk into an empty house and realize what he had lost. I was done by noon. The apartment was a shell. It looked like a showroom, clean and sterile and completely devoid of life. I stood in the middle of the living room and I looked around at the place that was supposed to be my home, and I felt nothing. Just that cold, hollow emptiness. I took one last look at the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom where I had cried so many tears, and then I walked out the door. I locked it behind me. I slipped the key under the mat, and I walked away. I drove to my new apartment in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just drove and I watched the city pass by, and I felt like I was waking up from a long, terrible dream. I had done it. I had actually done it. I had walked out of my marriage and I had done it on my terms. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't cried, I hadn't begged, I had just left, and it felt like the most powerful thing I had ever done. The next few days were a blur. I unpacked my boxes. I bought a bed. I bought a couch. I bought dishes and towels and all the little things I needed to start my new life. I didn't think about him. I didn't think about her. I just focused on the physical act of rebuilding. I hung my grandmother's painting on the wall. I arranged my books on the shelf. I put my grandmother's necklace in a little dish on my nightstand. I made coffee in the morning and I drank it on the fire escape, and I watched the sun come up over the city, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. It was fragile and thin and I knew it wouldn't last, but for a moment it was there. And I held onto it like a lifeline. But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. I knew he would come home. I knew he would find the empty apartment. I knew he would call me. And I knew I would have to face him eventually. I just didn't know when. I didn't know how. I didn't know what I would say, so I waited. I left my phone on the kitchen counter and I waited for it to ring. I knew he would call. He would call 100 times. He would leave 100 messages. He would text and he would beg and he would cry. And I would listen to all of it and I would feel nothing, because I had already said goodbye. I had already let go. He was just a ghost now, a memory, a mistake I had made when I was young and stupid and full of hope. And then the phone rang. It was the third day. He had just gotten home. I could hear it in his voice, that frantic, desperate edge. He was lost. He was confused. He was scared. He asked me where I was. He asked me if I was okay. He asked me what was going on. And I sat there holding the phone, listening to him panic, and I felt absolutely nothing. I told him I was safe. I told him I was fine. I told him I had moved out, and he asked me why. He said he didn't understand. He said we were happy. He said he loved me. And I laughed. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. He said we were happy. He said he loved me. He had been cheating on me for over a year, and he had the audacity to say he loved me. I laughed and I told him, * you don't get to say that. * he was silent for a long time. And then he said, * Emily, what are you talking about? * he still thought he could lie his way out of it. He still thought he could talk his way around the truth. He still thought I was the same stupid, trusting girl who believed every word that came out of his mouth. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him everything I knew. I wanted to recite every message I had read, every photo I had seen, every receipt I had found. I wanted to make him feel the weight of every single lie he had told. But I didn't. I just said, * I know about Vanessa. I know everything. * and I hung up. I turned off my phone. I pulled the battery out. I put it in a drawer and I closed the drawer and I walked away. I didn't want to hear his voice again. I didn't want to hear his excuses. I didn't want to hear his tears. I had heard enough. I had seen enough. I had felt enough. I was done. I was finally, completely, irrevocably done. And it felt like the heaviest weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I walked to the window and I looked out at the city and I felt free. I felt like I could breathe again. I felt like I could finally start living my life. And I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be hard days ahead. I knew I would have to face the loneliness and the heartbreak and the anger, but I also knew I would survive. I had survived the worst of it, and I was stronger than I had ever been. I thought hanging up would be the end of it. I thought turning off my phone and walking away would give me the clean break I needed, but I was wrong. The silence didn't last. It never does. The next morning, I woke up to a pounding on my door. It was 7:30 in the morning. The sun was just starting to filter through the blinds, casting these long, golden stripes across my new bedroom floor. I was still half asleep, tangled in sheets that didn't smell like him, and for a split second I forgot where I was. I forgot everything. And then the pounding came again, louder this time, and I knew it was him. I didn't open the door right away. I stood on the other side of it, my hand hovering over the lock, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't want to see him. I wasn't ready. But I also knew that if I didn't open the door, he would just keep pounding. He would wake up the neighbors. He would make a scene. He would force his way into my new life whether I wanted him there or not. So I unlocked the door and I opened it. He looked terrible. His eyes were red and swollen. His hair was a mess. He was wearing the same clothes he'd worn on his trip, wrinkled and rumpled like he hadn't slept or showered or even changed. He looked like a ghost. He looked like a man who had lost everything. And for a moment I felt a flicker of something. Not sympathy, not love, just a brief, fleeting moment of recognition. This was the man I had married. This was the man I had loved. And now he was standing in front of me, broken and desperate, and I was the one who had broken him. Emily, he said. His voice was hoarse. Please, just let me explain. I wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to tell him there was nothing to explain. I wanted to scream at him until my throat was raw. But I didn't. I just stood there, leaning against the doorframe, and I looked at him with the same cold, hollow expression I had perfected over the last few months. And I said, explain what, Nate? Explain how you lied to me for over a year. Explain how you made me feel like I was losing my mind while you were off with her. Explain how you looked me in the eyes and told me you loved me while you were planning trips with another woman. Go ahead. Explain. He opened his mouth and then he closed it. He didn't have anything to say. He didn't have any excuses left. He just stood there, trembling, looking at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Maybe the woman he married had died somewhere along the way and this cold, hard shell was all that was left. I'm sorry. He finally whispered. I'm so sorry, Emily. I know that doesn't mean anything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was such a pathetic, cliché thing to say. You never meant to hurt me. I repeated. Nate, you cheated on me for a year. You made a choice. Every single day you made a choice to lie to me. Every single day you chose her. So don't stand here and tell me you never meant to hurt me. You knew exactly what you were doing, you just didn't care. He flinched like I had slapped him, and for a second I felt a flicker of satisfaction. It was petty and small, but I wanted him to hurt. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain I had felt. I wanted him to know what it was like to be betrayed by the person you trusted most in the world. I know, he said. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve you. But Emily, I love you. I've always loved you. Vanessa didn't mean anything, it was just, I don't know what it was, I was stupid, I was selfish, I was lost, but I want to fix this, I want to fix us, please, just give me a chance. I stared at him. I stared at this man who had destroyed me, who had lied to me, who had made me feel worthless and small, and I realized something. He wasn't sorry, he was scared. He was scared of being alone. He was scared of losing the comfort and stability I had given him. He was scared of facing the consequences of his actions. But he wasn't sorry. Not really. Real tears, ugly, desperate tears. He fell to his knees in the hallway, right there in front of my door, and he begged me. He begged me to take him back. He told me he would do anything. He told me he would quit his job. He told me he would move across the country. He told me he would spend the rest of his life making it up to me. And I just stood there looking down at him and I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger. Just a cold, empty nothing. Get up. I said. Get up and leave. If you ever come here again, I'll call the police. He looked up at me, his face streaked with tears, and I could see the moment he realized I was serious. I could see the moment he realized that I was never coming back. He stood up slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand, and he looked at me one last time. And then he turned and walked away. I watched him disappear down the hallway and I closed the door. I locked it. I leaned against it and I slid down to the floor and I started to cry. Not for him, not for us, for me, for the woman I used to be, for the life I had lost. For the future I had to rebuild from scratch, but I didn't cry for long. I pulled myself together, wiped my face and got up. I had work to do. I had a life to build. I had to be strong. I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't let him drag me back into the darkness, so I did what I had to do. I went to work. I smiled at my coworkers. I pretended like everything was fine. I pretended like I hadn't just watched my husband beg me to take him back. I pretended like I was okay. And eventually the pretending stopped feeling like pretending. It started feeling real. I started to believe that I was okay. I started to believe that I could survive this. I started to believe that I could be happy again. But the universe had other plans. A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should, so I picked up and I heard a voice I didn't expect. It was her. Vanessa. She sounded different than I had imagined. She didn't sound confident or smug or cruel. She sounded small. She sounded scared. She said she wanted to meet me. She said she needed to talk to me. And I was so shocked, so completely caught off guard that I said yes before I even knew what I was doing. We met at a coffee shop downtown, the same one I had followed them to so many months ago. I got there early. I ordered a latte. I sat in the corner and I waited. I watched the door. And when she walked in, I felt my stomach drop. She was beautiful, even more beautiful than I had remembered. And she looked nervous. She was fidgeting with her purse strap, scanning the room, her eyes darting from face to face. When she saw me, she froze for a second, and then she walked over and sat down across from me. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She just sat there, staring at me, her hands shaking slightly around her cup. Asterisk, thank you for meeting me. Asterisk, she said. Her voice was quiet. Asterisk, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know you probably hate me, and you should hate me. Asterisk, I didn't say anything. I just stared at her waiting. Asterisk, I didn't know about you. Asterisk, she said. Asterisk, I mean, he told me he was married. But he told me it was over. He told me you were just a formality, that you were both just going through the motions, that you didn't love each other anymore. He told me a lot of things. And I believed him. I was stupid. I was so stupid. I fell in love with him and I believed everything he said, and then I found out the truth. I found out that you didn't know. I found out that he was still living with you, still sleeping with you, still telling you he loved you. And I realized that everything he had told me was a lie. Everything. Asterisk, I listened to her. I listened to her apologize. I listened to her explain. And I realized something that I hadn't expected. She was a victim too. She had been lied to just like me. She had been manipulated just like me. She had been used just like me. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I didn't hate her. I didn't forgive her, but I didn't hate her. Asterisk, he told me he loved me. Asterisk, she said, her voice breaking. Asterisk, he told me he was going to leave you. He told me we were going to be together, and I believed him. I gave up everything for him. I gave up my marriage. I gave up my house. I gave up my life, and now I have nothing. He's gone. He won't return my calls. He won't answer my texts. He just disappeared, and I have nothing. Asterisk, she started crying, right there in the middle of the coffee shop, surrounded by strangers, and I felt something I didn't expect. I felt sorry for her, not a lot, but enough. Enough to see that she was just as broken as I was. Enough to see that Nate had destroyed her just like he had destroyed me. And in that moment, I realized that he wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator. He was a man who used women, who manipulated women, who made women believe they were the only one when he was really just collecting them like trophies. He didn't love me. He didn't love her. He only loved himself. I reached across the table and I took her hand. It was the last thing I ever expected to do, but I did it. And she looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears, and she said, Asterisk, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Asterisk, and I said, Asterisk, I know you are. Asterisk, we sat there for a long time. We didn't talk much. We just sat there, two women who had been destroyed by the same man trying to make sense of the wreckage. And when we finally left, I hugged her. I hugged the woman who had slept with my husband. I hugged her and I told her it was going to be okay. And I meant it because I knew deep down that it would be. It would be okay, not today, not tomorrow. But someday we would both be okay. I walked out of that coffee shop and I felt different. I felt lighter. I felt like a chapter of my life had finally closed. I had said goodbye to Nate. I had said goodbye to Vanessa. I had said goodbye to the woman I used to be. And now I was ready to say hello to the woman I was going to become. The one who was strong. The one who was independent. The one who didn't need a man to complete her. The one who could stand on her own 2 feet and face whatever life threw at her. I was ready. I was finally, truly ready. And for the first time in over a year, I smiled. Not a fake smile. Not a forced smile. A real smile. A smile that came from somewhere deep inside me. A smile that said I was okay. I was going to be okay. I was going to survive this. And I was going to come out the other side stronger than ever. That's when I knew. This wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. I thought meeting Vanessa would be the final chapter. I thought I had closed the book, said my goodbyes, and walked away clean. But life doesn't work like that. It never does. The aftermath of a betrayal isn't a straight line. It's a tangled mess of loose ends and unexpected twists. And just when you think you've made peace with everything, something comes along to pull you right back into the chaos. I learned that the hard way. Because 3 months after I walked out of that coffee shop, 3 months after I started believing I was finally okay, Nate showed up at my door again. And this time, he wasn't alone. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in my apartment, finally feeling like myself again. I had painted the walls a soft sage green. I had bought new curtains and a new rug and a new bedspread. I had started going to yoga. I had started cooking again. I had started smiling without having to remind myself to do it. I was rebuilding my life, brick by brick, and for the first time in a long time I was actually happy. I had even started dating. Nothing serious. Just coffee. Just dinner, just the simple pleasure of being treated like a person instead of a possession. There was a guy named Mark. He was an architect. He had kind eyes and a gentle laugh, and he didn't try to rush me into anything. He was patient. He was respectful. He was everything Nate had never been. And I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I could love again. And then the doorbell rang. I opened the door without looking through the peephole. I don't know why. Maybe I was just too comfortable. Maybe I had let my guard down. Maybe I had finally stopped being afraid. But when I opened the door, I saw Nate standing there, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. And next to him stood a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. He had messy brown hair and big blue eyes, and he was clutching a stuffed dinosaur like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I looked at the boy, and then I looked at Nate, and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Emily, Nate said, his voice was shaky. I need to talk to you. I didn't say anything, I couldn't. My brain was screaming at me, but my voice wouldn't work. I just stared at the little boy, at his small face, at the way he was clinging to Nate's leg like he was scared of me. And then I looked at Nate, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Fear. Real fear. The kind of fear that comes from knowing your whole world is about to fall apart. Who is this? I finally managed to say. My voice was barely a whisper. Nate looked down at the boy and then back at me, and I watched his face crumple. This is Liam. He said. He's my son. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, grabbing onto the doorframe to keep from falling. My mind was racing, trying to process what he had just told me, trying to make sense of it. He had a son. Nate had a son he had never told me about. A son who was standing right there in front of me, looking up at me with those big blue eyes that were so much like his father's. You have a son. I said. My voice was shaking now. You have a son and you never told me. Nate opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stood there, looking at me with that pathetic, desperate expression, and I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask him how many other secrets he had been hiding. I wanted to ask him if there was anything about his life that had been real, but I didn't. Because the little boy was still standing there, looking at me like I was a monster, and I couldn't bring myself to make a scene in front of him. Can we come in? Nate asked quietly. Please, I'll explain everything, I promise. I should have said no. I should have slammed the door in his face and called the police, but I didn't because I couldn't stop staring at Liam. He was so small, so innocent, so completely unaware of the chaos he had just walked into, and I couldn't turn him away. I didn't have it in me. I stepped back and let them in. Nate led Liam to the couch and sat him down, and I watched as he knelt in front of the little boy and said, Stay here, buddy. I'll be right back. I just need to talk to Emily for a minute, okay? Liam nodded, clutching his dinosaur, and Nate stood up and walked toward me. We went into the kitchen out of earshot, and I turned to face him. What the hell is going on? I demanded. You have a son. How long have you known about him? Why didn't you ever tell me? Nate ran a hand through his hair, looking more exhausted than I had ever seen him. I didn't know. He said. I swear to you, Emily, I didn't know. I only found out a few weeks ago. His mother, she died. She was in a car accident, and I just found out that he's mine. She never told me. She kept him from me for years, and now I'm all he has. I stared at him. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. I was angry, I was confused, I was heartbroken. But underneath all of that, I felt something else. Something I didn't expect. I felt sorry for him. Not for the cheating, not for the lies, for this. For the situation he was in. For the fact that he had been handed a child he didn't know existed and he had no idea what to do with him. Asterisk, why are you here? Asterisk, I asked. My voice was softer now. Asterisk, why did you bring him here? Asterisk, Nate looked at me and his eyes filled with tears. Asterisk, because I don't know what else to do. Asterisk, he admitted. Asterisk, I don't have anyone else. My parents are gone. My friends are gone. I lost everything, Emily, everything, and Liam. He needs someone, he needs a mother, and I thought maybe you could help. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I don't deserve your help. But I don't know where else to go. Asterisk, I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to tell him that I had already done enough for him, that I had already given him too much of my life, my heart, my sanity. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't his safety net, that I wasn't his backup plan, that I wasn't going to clean up the mess he had made of his life. But then I looked out into the living room, and I saw Liam sitting on the couch, clutching his dinosaur, looking around my apartment with wide, uncertain eyes. He didn't ask to be here. He didn't ask for any of this. He was just a little boy who had lost his mother and had been handed over to a father he barely knew. And my heart broke for him. It broke in a way that surprised me, in a way that I didn't expect. Asterisk, I need time. Asterisk, I finally said. Asterisk, I need to think about this. Asterisk, Nate nodded. He didn't push. He didn't beg. He just looked at me with that same desperate expression, and he said, Asterisk, I take all the time you need. We'll be at the hotel. I'm not going to leave the city. I'm not going to leave you. I'll wait as long as it takes. Asterisk, I walked them to the door. Liam looked up at me and said, Asterisk, bye. Asterisk, it was the first word he had spoken since he arrived. I smiled at him, a small, fragile smile, and I said, Asterisk, bye, Liam. Asterisk, and then they were gone. The door clicked shut behind them, and I leaned against it, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Nate had told me. I thought about the years of lies. I thought about the affair. I thought about Vanessa. I thought about the way he had betrayed me, the way he had destroyed me. And then I thought about Liam. I thought about the little boy who had lost his mother. I thought about the fact that he was now in the care of a man who had proven himself to be selfish and unreliable. I thought about all the ways that Nate had failed me, and I wondered if he would fail Liam too. But I also thought about something else. I thought about the possibility of second chances. Not for Nate, not for us, but for Liam. The thought terrified me. The thought of letting Nate back into my life, even in some small way, felt like a betrayal of everything I had fought so hard to rebuild. But the thought of abandoning a child who had done nothing wrong felt even worse. I was torn. I was conflicted. I was angry and sad and confused all at the same time. The next morning, I woke up with a decision. I didn't know if it was the right one. I didn't know if it was the smart one, but it was the only one I could live with. I called Nate and I told him that I would help. I told him that I would spend time with Liam. I told him that I would try to be there for him, but I also told him that this wasn't about us. This wasn't about forgiveness. This wasn't about getting back together. This was about Liam, and only about Liam. Nate agreed. He said he understood. He said he would do whatever I needed. He said he was grateful. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I didn't trust him. I didn't love him, but I believed him. The next few weeks were strange. Nate and I started spending time together again, but it was different. We weren't a couple. We were two people trying to navigate a complicated situation. We would take Liam to the park. We would take him to the zoo. We would take him to get ice cream. And slowly, I started to see a different side of Nate. I saw the way he looked at Liam. I saw the way he held his hand. I saw the way he tried so hard to be a good father, even though he had no idea what he was doing. And I started to see the boy he used to be. The boy I had fallen in love with. The boy who was kind and gentle and full of hope. The boy who had gotten lost somewhere along the way. I didn't forgive him. I didn't forget what he had done, but I started to understand. I started to see that he was just as broken as I was, that he had made terrible choices that had hurt everyone around him, but that he was trying to be better. And that had to count for something. It had to. One night, after we put Liam to bed, Nate and I were sitting on my fire escape, looking out at the city. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve any of this, but I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you're giving me a chance. Even if it's not for me, even if it's just for him. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, looking out at the lights, feeling the cool night air on my skin, and I realized that I had come a long way. I had survived the unimaginable. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. I had learned to be strong, to be independent, to be whole on my own, and I had also learned to be compassionate, to be understanding, to give second chances, even when they weren't deserved. I wasn't the same woman I used to be. I was better, I was stronger, I was wiser, and I was ready for whatever came next.